A resource tool launched by International Institutes for Democracy and Electoral Assistance, International IDEA, and Gender Links has revealed that women's representation in African parliaments has risen to 25% in 2024. The report notes an increase in women's representation in top executive government positions, but a decline in local government, with East Africa seeing an 11% decline in local government and a 16% increase in executive roles. Although the report acknowledges progress in advancing meaningful political participation for women in Africa, the progress recorded is still slow. With only 6 years until 2030, most African countries are unlikely to meet the 50% target for women's political participation set in SDG 5.5. Program Manager, International IDEA, Josephine Mwangi, joins me for more on these findings. Good to have you join us on World Now. Talk to us, what was the driving force for this study and how many countries took part in it?
Thank you very much for having me on the program. This study was first run in 2021, and it is a barometer that seeks to look at what is the progress of women's political representation and participation in Africa, to take sort of a pulse of where we are at and where we're going, and if we will be able as a continent, to achieve the SDG goals, especially 5.5. So it basically aims to inform legislatures and policymakers with data and to access, to be able to actually make laws, policies that actually look at how to achieve the SDGs and also the African Union aspirations to having equality in terms of political participation and representation.
All right. And the report notes an increase in women's representation in top executive government positions, but a decline in local government. What does this mean, and what did the report reveal as factors responsible for the figures?
Let me nuance that a bit. We had an increase in the numbers of women in both upper houses and lower houses of parliament. We had a 1% increase, which is something to celebrate still. But considering that we had 36 elections from the time that the first barometer was launched in 2021, and this barometer in 2024, so in 3 years we've had 36 countries having one type of election or the other. I think the progress is painstakingly slow. We've had almost all different regions in Africa represented, and we've had increases, I guess, in most indicators, because we looked at upper houses, lower houses, mayors of cities. That was the best in terms of the improvements, and mayors of capital cities. We've had women increasing in top executive positions and increases in cabinets in Africa, which points to the fact that at least there is commitment across the continent in terms of having more women representation. We had representation. We looked at all regions of Africa, Horn of Africa, East Africa, South Africa, Central Africa, the North, and the specific country profiles are also included, but mainly from the South African region. So we have increase in everything except leadership of women at the top 3 positions in political parties, where we had a major drop in all countries that was surveyed, except South Africa, where we had an increase of about 5%. So it says that political parties, which are the gateways for most women to get into politics in Africa, is still a major challenge that needs to be overcome on top of the other challenges that women face.
All right. So I was actually also asking about the factors that you discovered to be responsible for, the decline, where we have a decline. Is it that women were not allowed to run for office? Is it that there were certain ethnic or religious, factors that inhibited their aspirations and eventual success in elections?
I think the challenges are both formal and informal. And in this case, if we specifically speak about political parties, most political parties are owned, if you can call it that, owned by men, and they hardly have top at the national executive committees and leaders. They hardly have women, and when they do, it's really deputy and not really the ones who hold the strings of power. Now, if we look at other challenges, if we speak directly to formal challenges, I think one key area that the report found is that the formal structures include the type of political system that exists in any country and whether or not they have quotas. If we have proportional representation or past the post or a mixed system, it had different results in the numbers of women that got into elective positions. And we also found that at least with countries that have quotas for women, which is 41 out of the 54 countries in Africa, we had mixed results, but at least the quota system to getting women into political participation has helped a lot of women get into politics. One other key challenge we found was the issues of campaign financing and funding by the political parties for women. That is a key challenge, and I think it's experienced all over the continent, and the level playing field is very hard. So economic empowerment of women to be able to finance their politics is key, but also support from political parties.
All right.
We also found that women candidates are put into places where they are unlikely to win. So a party will say, well, we have the quota, but the candidate will be in a place or in a location where they are unlikely to win the elections. So it's on paper, but in practice, there is a lot that can still be done.
We'll talk about what has to be done next. This report actually found that gender parity in African Parliament will not be achieved until the year 2100, which is 76 years away. What are your recommendations for attaining the goal much earlier than then?
One, I think the African leadership needs to agree that women must be represented. I think it's one thing to look at the numbers. We have had a 1% increase in 3 years. Imagine if we continue at the same rate. Obviously, we're not even going to meet the SDG targets in 2030 and not even in 2100. I think that's what the report says. However, if we look at laws within the countries in the African continent, I think globally it will take 238 years. That is research saying 238 years to actually have equity in the laws that have passed. So in Africa, this time will be doubled. So if we want to have parity, and we're looking at 50-50 representation, we need to change the laws, need to change the electoral system, stick to actually implementing the quotas, removing barriers, including digitalization.
All right.
A lot of politics is happening online, and it's a two-edged sword for women because the violence is also happening online.
I hear you.
As well as physical.
I hear you, and thank you very much, for bringing this up and for helping us better understand the findings of that report. Josephine Mwangi is Program Manager for International IDEA. Thank you so much for talking to us on World Now.